Hello and welcome to Mann's Model Moments. The Alvis Stalwart was released a couple of weeks ago, but I didn't receive my shop stock until a full week after release, so by the time I got mine there were already plenty of unboxing videos out there. As such, I'm going to concentrate more on the actual build here and give you a rundown of the kit's high and low points. I will give you a quick look inside though, because I want you to see what I do, as it will feed into my final thoughts later. So the first thing is that this is a nice, solid and sturdy box, which is great. Unfortunately, inside everything is bagged together and there is a fair amount of room for the frames to move around inside, potentially leading to detached, damaged or scratched parts. The other thing to note is that the bag itself is much bigger than is needed, meaning the frames can also move about within the bag, exacerbating the room in the box issue. At least the transparencies are bagged separately inside that bag. Now these are small points, but as we'll see later they add to a cumulative total. Under that we have the usual Airfix standard instruction booklet with the decals inside protected with their usual translucent paper. Now I'm not going to say too much about the instructions here. On the face of it, they're standard Airfix fare with logical steps and intelligent use of colour to show prior assemblies as usual. We also get 3 full colour painting guides, though being a post-war British vehicle its schemes are somewhat limited. They also call out the incorrect colour for some of these schemes, since matte bronze green is called out, but British stalwarts switched to NATO green fairly early on in their careers, so as always, don't rely on the instructions for your painting, but do your own research. Even so, this is still a little sloppy from Airfix's side. For the rest of the notes on the instructions, I'll call these out as we go through the build itself. Now, like with the instructions, I'm not going to go over the frames exhaustively given the amount of existing unboxings, but this is an example of what can happen when you've got room for things to move around. This drive shaft has almost come off the sprue, and this part was just floating freely around in the bag. Next we come to sink marks. Mine weren't too bad, but the location of these in the rear light clusters makes them incredibly difficult to remedy satisfactorily. If that wasn't bad enough, the light guard on the left side is also slightly short shot. Not terribly, but again it's just another niggle. These haven't shown up well on the camera, but these are more sink marks in difficult to remedy areas. Ironically, the plain back here is fine. Here you have the 2 side pieces for the canvas cover, and you can see on this one there is engraved detail around the holes representing the brass cleats to prevent ripping, but on the other side they've been missed out, which is obviously a design oversight. Whilst we're on the canvas cover, this is moulded in one piece, and because of that the end covers are some of the worst representation of canvas I've seen in a 1/35th scale kit. They're present on both ends too, and I think they really detract from the overall look of the vehicle. I'd advise replacing or reworking these. Anyway, back to sink marks, and I heard others make remarks about the moulding of this mesh being wrong, which was then shown to be correct, but mine just has a sink mark, so it's a bit of a moot point on mine, and again, almost impossible to correct. Right, enough of that, let's actually build it. We start off with having to drill some holes, which is called out in the instructions very nicely and is no issue. These side pieces then go onto the main monocoque hull piece, and they fit intuitively and very snugly. After which we can add the water jet nozzles. These are a very snug fit and would really be better to be put on before adding these sides to the main hull. We then have to drill more holes, and these ones are a bit odd, as you need to drill them at 40 degrees. Not 45 degrees, not 35 degrees, but 40. And Airfix don't supply you with a jig to get this right like they do with some of the aircraft kits like the Jaguar and Gannet. I also don't know why they didn't call out all of the drilling at one time before the start, like on the Sea King, because I got a bit sick of putting my drill away and getting it out again. Yes, you can look ahead and do all of this drilling at once, which is what I did after the 3rd instance of this, but when Airfix have done this better before, this feels like a retrograde step. Once drilled, this rear part goes on nicely with no issues. Likewise, so does the front, and the fit is really nice here. At this point, I was pretty enthusiastic about this kit. More drilling. 5 holes in total here for the front, and this is where I decided to drill everything. So we then get more for the roof. And then 3 holes in each of the sides. It was then time to deal with the cab ejector pin marks. These are massive, and although mine weren't too deep, I still wanted to deal with them. I'm using sprue goo thick here so I can manipulate it easily in this big open space. I did the same with the marks in the sides, though they're not going to be too visible in the finished model as I'm closing mine up anyway. Next was an issue I really didn't expect: cleaning up flash. It was only in this one part, but it's the most complex part in the kit and not that easy to clean up. It just struck me as bizarre that it's present, and it really shouldn't be in a brand new 2025 moulding. Still, it's not beyond any average modeller's ability to deal with, it's just another item on the niggles list. Seats are next. The side ones are simple 2-piece affairs, whilst the centre one is a 4-piecer. They're a bit on the chunky side, but you won't see most of them, and they go together with no drama. The seats have very positive fitment into the cab, and you can also see the ejector pin marks here now they've been dealt with and smoothed with extra thin. Next to go in are the handbrake, gear lever, and 2-part steering wheel, which you can see I put together before mounting on the floor. All of these have very positive locating lugs and present no issues. I decided to go for the box rather than the seat on the right, and both that and the cleaned up cluster go into place nicely. We then have the mount for the radio on the left to go on. And the instrument cluster support and pedal controls in the front. Onto that I used the little radio, as my large one had the same missing parts from the support mount that others have reported. The fire extinguishers can then be mounted on the main cab plate next, and though a bit fiddly, they locate nicely. Those mounted, the rear cab interior can be glued to this plate, just be careful not to knock the extinguishers when you do that. This assembly then goes into the main hull and it locks into place very nicely. More fire extinguishers now. These ones mounted on the inside of the cab, again without issues. The right hand side also has this box on, which is nicely indexed. We then come to an area which has received some discussion: building the cab body. I found the best way to put the sides on was to put them correctly flush at the bottom about halfway along and then slide them back into place, where they lock into place quite positively. You'll know when it's right, and it's important to note that the bottom should be completely flush and the ends fully against the back. Now I've not trimmed any parts at the front here, and when I bring the cab front on and then push it back into position, you can see it aligns perfectly. The important thing here is that these side areas that form the cab floor, where the front attaches at the sides, are part of that initial monocoque, part A14. If they are slightly warped, either through manufacture or in how A12 and A13 are cemented on, even by a tiny bit, you'll get an apparent gap on one side. Knowing that, you can take care and glue everything appropriately, forcing everything into shape. Now before I do that, I'm going to prime everything black here, but my main issue is that there's nothing to warn you of this in the kit, so people have come up with all sorts of issues here when there really isn't one. It's just very tight tolerances combined with sloppy production QC. No one would have ever noticed if this kit was injected by Tamiya or ICM because it would just fit beautifully. When it is done correctly, the cab roof sits on top flawlessly, showing how good the design is here, and the issue is not with that but on how that design has been translated into plastic form. Now I'm not using the canvas cover, so I need to deal with the sink marks in the rear interior, as these were flat on actual Stalwarts. I'm using a new sprue goo mixture here, incorporating some mineral elements to make it dry faster with less shrinkage and making it easier to sand. It'll be available for sale soon. I'm also using this to fill the slightly harder to address sink marks on the deck rear. Whilst that was drying, I turned to the suspension, which is one of the highlights of the kit in my opinion. The first step is this long piece which locks into place very positively in the hull. The gas strut assemblies go in next, sliding through the prior piece and again locating in lugs within the hull. I should also say here that the instructions for the suspension are extremely clear and well laid out, as shown. The centre piece is handed, so make sure you get this in the right way round. Now half of the driveshaft pieces have this extra bit on the end, so don't trim it off thinking it's part of the injection gate. The two halves then fit together well, but there is no indexing at all here, it's just by eye, and I don't know why Airfix didn't design in some sort of locating tab here. Just be careful to align them well. The driveshafts then press into these frames, which is tricky if the driveshaft assemblies are not fully dry, as you can deform them when doing this. When they are correctly located in these pieces, it's obvious however, which is a bonus. These assemblies can then be placed onto the hull, where they fit extremely well. As each is different, I'd suggest doing them one by one, rather than making up all the sub-assemblies and then fitting them. There are several of these articulated links to fit, and these do fit flawlessly despite their small size. These guide pieces are next, and it's really important to fit them the right way up. That's because this transverse piece goes in next, and it won't fit if you've got the prior bit upside down. If it's correct, this step is simple. This next piece locates onto the hull easily, and then this little linkage goes between it and the other driveshaft, and this is a bit fiddly, worthy of patience and tweezers to ensure good alignment. Hull loops are next. There's a fair few of these, but they're not difficult with the aid of tweezers. Once all these assemblies are complete, the lower suspension arms pieces can be put in to lock them all in place, and then you can make adjustments to the individual units as needed. We can then cover the ugly bits with the lower hull, which fits perfectly. The hubs with their disc brakes are next, and once again these are different across the three positions on each side, so I'd suggest taking them in turn. They go on well, are indexed to fit in the required position and look great too, even though you won't see them at all when the model is finished. We have a couple of handles to go on next, because the only way to get into the Stalwart is through the top. And how well these go in is dependent on your prior drilling skills. We have some elements to go on the front through more of our drilled holes. And then we can put the caps on the one-piece wheel hubs. This part for the rear side assembly is best started with the top piece. If you don't, the fit of the rest is very ambiguous, and the instructions do not help here. With this piece on, however, it's quite simple. The exhaust is next. I went for the dual exhaust and drilled out the pipes for a more authentic look. After that, the casing they run through can go together, and then these two assemblies can go onto the hull. With the exhaust being cemented on too. Now it's time to put the rear deck in, and I've no idea why the instructions tell you to do this after the prior two steps. It'd be much better doing those after this. Oh well, you kind of get used to these schizophrenic instructions after a while. The forward access panel can then be glued in, as well as this piece. Here are all the various panels after sanding and smoothing. You could do more here, but I just went for a single round. The annoying thing is that they're not that deep, but it's an hour that added nothing pleasurable to the build here. The rear of the loading area goes in next. Followed by a number of these locking side pieces. And then we're into stowage. There's a number of items here that all lock into place very well, and this part all follows a pretty logical sequence with no pitfalls. At the rear, we then get to see how good our 40-degree angle drilling was when we put in this piece. And then we've some towing eyes to put in place as well. As well as the main towing latch. You get two two-piece water containers for the rear storage area, which are very nice and simple to make and locate into place easily. At the front of the cab we have this guard piece that locates into its index positions very well. And then the central spotlight can go into position. The side headlights also go into place at this point. And then we can make the swimming guard. I've put it in its stowed position, so these retracted pieces are glued into place, and then the bar put in between them. The whole thing goes onto the holes we drilled in the front cab piece earlier. And then the two hatches go on next. I'm closing my cab up, but they can go in either position and the fit is very positive. Time to get the sides on, and these are also nice and easy to fit. The canvas cover support is solid, but in reality it was tubular, so I decided to drill mine out. I used progressively larger bits so as not to stress any of the elements too much. The headlight guards are moulded as solid parts, so I decided to improve these by drilling and cutting out the centres and using evergreen styrene to recreate the grille. Here are the finished items. They're not perfect, but an improvement on the simplistic items provided, I feel. The last pieces here are the rear mud flaps before we get into painting. Now I just want to take a moment to thank all of you who have supported me directly through YouTube memberships and Patreon. This really does keep the channel going, and without you it would be very difficult for me to be able to continue doing this. Now if you're only just seeing your name on here for the first time, it's because I update this monthly, and if I've prepared some videos ahead of time, then there may still have the old list on, even if the list has been updated since then. Don't worry though, your name will get on the list and will continue to appear throughout your support. If you are considering supporting me, YouTube channel membership is by far the easiest way to do this, since Patreon is becoming a more challenging platform to engage with. Whichever you choose, however, I absolutely appreciate your contributions, and don't forget to come and check out the private members Discord, which you get access to at any level. Now I wanted to do something different here, and I was inspired by a SpongeBob SquarePants episode.
I'll be out of here in no time. 2,000 years later.
Yes, I'm doing a Stalwart of the future. What does that mean, you ask? Well, if you are a SpongeBob aficionado, you've probably already guessed where I'm going with this. But if not, I'll let SpongeBob explain it.
Welcome to the future!
The future? Huh? Oh, okay, what's going on here? Why is everything chrome?
Everything is chrome in the future!
Oh, my. Impossible! He's lying!
So yes, I'm going to be doing my Stalwart in chrome. As you can see, I've already primed it in black. And as you can see from the side mirrors here, I've already made a start to the chrome. These I've done using a Molotow marker liquid chrome pen, but obviously I can't do that for the whole thing. Fortunately, Molotow also do a refill for their pens, which is expensive, but it can be airbrushed, making it ideal here. So I'm using the liquid chrome, and I'm going to thin it with Mann's Model Magic to give it a better chance of achieving a chrome-like finish with the airbrush. Now I did this because chrome is an unforgiving finish that will show absolutely any imperfections, both highlighting any issues I've missed and also showing that some of the issues raised with this kit aren't quite as bad as they've been made out to be. Now if some of you think that this is a bit out there and you can't get your head around it, I'll again leave SpongeBob to suggest a remedy.
Thanks.
Now with everything suitably chrome, it's time to put the wheels together. I'm fixing the hubs to the rear halves of the tyres here. And then putting the fronts on using the two differently sized tabs to ensure these are perfectly aligned. These are very pleasing to put together and are another highlight of the kit. After painting, some of the panels need rubbing down with 1000 grit sanding sponge before painting again, but I didn't do more than that before adding the final touches like the transparencies, all of which go on without any fuss. So let's see this Stalwart of the far future then. Now before I get into my final thoughts, let's take a look at what my 5 top good and bad things are about this kit. As always, we'll start with the positive. At number 5, I'm going to give Airfix credit for the clear exhaust shroud. Some people are criticising this, but honestly, most companies would have cast this in coloured plastic with a texture on or holes which you'd have had to hope were correctly moulded. This is a good and quite innovative compromise, I feel, and doesn't deserve the hate it's generated. If you don't like it, you can drill out the holes or replace it with photo etch, but as an out-of-the-box solution I think it's rather clever. Next is the general level of detail, which is pretty good. You get a decent instrument panel, cab detail, most of which won't be seen in the finished kit, and good detail elements over the rest of the body. It does have some shortcuts taken on some areas, like the canvas cover tie-downs, but nothing that's terrible. It's not blow-you-away level good, but it is good. The third thing I want to highlight are the wheels, which are some of the best fitting I've seen in any kit, and are extremely satisfying to make. As you get 6 of them, you get a lot of that too. Moulded side details are great, and the hubs are very nicely detailed for single-piece items, with the caps carrying on that theme. They're a distinctive part of the kit, and they're excellent. Related to that are the suspension assemblies, which are the most detailed and complex areas of the kit, which are also quite straightforward to build. The only shame here is that these aren't really that visible on the finished model, and you don't have any options for angling these out of the box, which given its multi-wheel steering is a real shame. They do look great though, and probably offer a lot of options if you want to start cutting them up for different heights and positions, etc. Overall, however, I'd say the kit's best point is that it's a pretty pleasing build overall, especially if you're aware of the kit's pitfalls in advance. With a bit of care and attention, you can turn out a decent stolly in short order. It just took me 2 days to build this kit. Less time than it took to apply the chrome finish and for it to cure enough to photograph, but that was my own choice. Now obviously not all is sweetness and light with this kit as I pointed out, so here are my 5 main gripes. Least of them is that the instructions aren't up to Airfix's usual quality. Not in terms of production value, but in terms of actual instruction. There are several parts in the build where it's either not clear what the step is telling you to do without trying out future steps, or they don't emphasise the importance of certain areas to prevent bigger issues later. The cab is one such instance. In other areas they're excellent, which just makes the other areas seem worse somehow, and gives a feeling like these were rushed. The second fly in the ointment here are the lack of alternate pieces for certain elements, namely the windows with wipers moulded on. This is especially bizarre since other kits like the Gannet do provide these, and it then makes Airfix look disjointed, like designers don't share notes. The alternative explanation is that they do and just decided not to, which feels like penny pinching. Neither has a good feel. I do also think that Airfix should have provided a small photo etch fret for the exhaust shroud, windscreen wipers and headlight protectors. The fact that they did this for the Katie and the Cromwell and have just announced their 1/24th beer run Spitfire with Edward parts again makes this feel rather disjointed or penny pinching. That brings me to some of the design choices here, which seem a bit odd. Placement of ejector pins is generally good, but then you have the huge ones in the cab in rather obvious positions. You have the nice clear exhaust shroud but completely filled coloured plastic for the headlight protectors. The centerline canvas support is in one piece, meaning the ends are solid rather than tubular as on the real thing, which could have been rectified by making it 3 pieces instead of 1. You have a great detailed canvas cover to go over that, with some of the worst end pieces I've seen in a 1/35th scale kit, which would have been far better redesigned as separate, less complex and more easily moulded parts. You get separate side pieces after all, though on one of these the brass cleat details have been forgotten, which is just a mistake. Another mistake is the reversing of the detail on one of the radios, something that should have been picked up in Design QC. And remember, this was Luke's job before he left to work at Revell. At times it just feels like 2 designers were working on this kit with very different agendas, or that one designer was given it and then their deadline was brought forward a month or so and they had to rush half of it, that feeling being emphasised by these simple errors. This makes the kit appear to lack design care and coherence, and it feels like it was reviewed and edited by the same person who designed it so that they were blind to their own errors. We then get to the worst of these kit's crimes, the first of which are the sync marks. With today's 3D CAD, emulation software and test shots, sync marks should be a thing of the past, as you can design a large part of them out. The unfortunate fact is that this kit suffers from a variable amount of sync, which probably means that this is down to the actual production of the kit and QC thereof. It's also often in areas that are hard to correct, meaning you can either ignore it, do a lot of work to address it, or replace the part. If you want any sort of open rear, you need to address the sink marks in the flat-sided interior panels, and this does not add to the otherwise enjoyable build. The least enjoyable part of this was addressing the sink marks. Now, it's not that they can't be addressed. The question is, in 2025, when paying £40 for a 1/35th scale vehicle, that you shouldn't have to. I can say 100% that addressing the sink marks here, that I did, and it wasn't all of them, added nothing positive to the building experience for me. Far from it. And the sad fact is that I think most of it is down to poor QC practices. Number 1 on the bad things here is also a QC issue: short shots. Now, the simple fact is that any manufacturer can suffer from short shots, just like anyone can make a mistake. The important thing is what you do about it. Most companies have QC procedures that catch these things before they can go on to be packaged and sent out, but Airfix seems to either not have this in their subcontractors, or these companies are simply ignoring them and doing what they feel like. Airfix's short shot incidence is much higher than other companies, and this feels like a Hornby penny pinching thing rather than an Airfix not caring thing. Overall, these negatives combine to suck some of the joy from what should have been a triumphant release for Airfix this year. The Stalwart was widely praised when announced, with many pre-ordering the kit in eager anticipation. If Hornby had spent the money to ensure that this was a consistently good kit, it would be a different story, but the fact is that some of these were already raised back in March when the first test shot reviews were out, which again makes it feel that it's Airfix's Hornby masters that just say, "It's good enough, we're not spending any more money on this." That's a real shame, because I can't really give you any advice on this one. I got a pretty okay version in my box, which didn't have any particularly bad ejector pin marks, relatively small amounts of sink marks, and only a couple of areas of short shot. If mine was a bad example, that would be one thing, but there are many people who have received much worse than I did. So unfortunately, this once again falls into that all too common recent Airfix trope of, they do nice kits, provided you get a good one. Now, one of the reasons I did my Stalwart in chrome was to highlight some of these issues, and also to show you that even on an unforgiving finish, some of them are actually quite minor and don't detract from the build overall. Another was to have something very different to any of the other Stalwarts that are going to be out there, and lastly, I wanted to bring some levity and fun into what could otherwise seem like Airfix bashing. So to bring this review to its conclusion, let me give you a final score, which I think reflects this perfectly. 69%, just under a silver. I think that accurately reflects the slight letdown that this kit represents, whilst not being an absolute disaster as some have claimed. It does, however, take it down from a silver to a bronze rating. It's a good kit, but there are too many cumulative factors just pulling it down for it to get higher. In fact, if it hadn't been for the QC issues and design errors, this kit would shoot from a 69% to 82%, earning it a gold, because some of those QC issues result in build issues, which if absent would have made this kit glorious. At the end of the day, the overall feeling you get from this kit is not the excellent research represented by the Sea King, or beautiful engineering shown in the Gannet, but a lovely kit which has been burdened by odd design choices and mistakes, appalling production QC, and an overall impression of everything being done either in a hurried manner or with less budget than was required. Don't get me wrong, you can make an excellent Stalwart from this kit, but the problems I and others have highlighted degrade this from competing in the Premier League with Tamiya, and instead making it just the second division with Italeri. Remember, the Italeri Basotto I recently built is the same price as this kit, with none of these issues and containing a turned aluminium gun barrel. I hope for Airfix's sake that Hornby sort out whatever has gone on here, because the underlying reasons why these things have happened are more worrying than a few sink marks. Now, if you like this video, I hope I've earned a like and a subscription, and if you click the notification bell and set that to all, you should also find out when I upload other videos. I try to do some less obvious modelling related content as well as the standard build reviews, so do check out some of those if you've not visited the channel before. All of this is absolutely free, of course, which is excellent value, I feel. That's all for this instalment of Mann's Model Moments. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel for more like it, and share this video with others you think would also enjoy it. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and if you're feeling generous, then I also have a Patreon, which is absolutely the best way of helping me to grow the channel and produce more content like this. With that, I hope you have plenty of modelling moments of your own, and I look forward to welcoming you on the next video.